Hey, what's up, everybody? Happy September almost. So, readings just went out. It's Saturday, the 30th. And I wanted to just do a quick video because it's a pretty momentous month that we're going into, mostly because we're finally getting out of the Old Testament. So I just had a couple thoughts around that, or a couple just things to watch for. First of all, crazy to think of how much of the Bible is comprised of the Hebrew Scriptures. I actually prefer Hebrew Scriptures or First Testament to the Old Testament because we have such a problem as Christians, I think, recognizing the value of the story of God. Anyway, I just use I try to use different language when I can. So anyway, man, huge 9 months worth of readings, all dealing with God's story prior to Jesus. So that's the first thing. The second thing is to remind everybody, in case I didn't bring this up last time, the importance of the fall of Jerusalem and the exile. So, we've been it seems like for months, at least 1 month, maybe 2 months, there's just been this build up to the exile, build up to the fall of Jerusalem and God's people being taken away to Babylon. And it's, in a way, it's kind of still building up. And I think this month has one of my favorite, in a kind of funny way, favorite scriptures, which I'll get to in a second. I'll talk while I'm looking it up. Anyway, it's massive. It's monumental for God's people. A couple things out of it. Like, one, God's people no longer have the temple where God said, that's the place where I'm going to dwell. Ezekiel, I mentioned that, like, there's that passage in Ezekiel where it talks about God's presence leaving the temple. That's already bad enough as it is. But then God's people are taken away from the temple, taken away from the spot where God said his presence was going to dwell. Now they're in Babylon. And what's more is Jeremiah, those passages in Jeremiah where he's like, listen, seek the good of the city that you're in, which is in Babylon. Seek the good of that city. Stay put, because you're going to be there. Learn to thrive. Learn what it means to live in exile, which I think is profoundly important for us today in so many reasons, which I won't go into right now. But it's the development, that is when the development of the synagogues, or the precursor to the synagogues and the precursor to the rabbis start to happen, because there's no longer a centralized place of worship. Now God's people are distributed all over the place. How do you worship God when there's no central place of worship anymore? And so what they do is they sort of, I don't want to say improvise, but they discern how they're supposed to live in light of these new realities. So you see smaller gatherings rising up in the synagogue system. And you also see the importance of the written word, start to rise up, because now people want to know, how do we connect with God? It used to be going to the temple. Now, increasingly, since there is no temple, they look to Torah, the law, the writings, to not take the place of God, but to like God is going to reside in the words of Scripture in a very special way to God's people. That's going to carry forth into the time of Jesus, which leads me to the last piece of importance for the exile, and that is, exile is what Jesus, the mental condition, the situation of exile is what Jesus steps into when he arrives on the scene. So to understand that, God's people were living in their land, God was king, God was protecting them from their enemies, then they were exiled because why? Their sins of idolatry and not caring for the poor. They're taking away to Babylon. Now it's very clearly they're not in the land, and God is not king, at least in an overt way. Now they've come back to the land, so Jesus shows up in Palestine. God's people are in Palestine. But there's a problem in the sense that God's people are not in charge. Rome is now in charge. And so there is, N.T. Wright and other scholars have really like highlighted this, and I think they're right. I think they're right that there is a condition of like we must still be in exile, because according to the prophets, when exile is over, God will be king. His enemies will sort of be vanquished. We will have shalom, peace and security in the land. And they may be back in the land, but they don't have sovereignty. God is not overtly in control. And there seems to be little peace and security outside of what Rome has to offer. So if you reverse engineer this, just so you know, the problem is Israel's sin. A little foreshadowing here. Because God said, when we deal with your sin, when your sin is dealt with, Israel, then your exile will be over. Well, so they're back in the land, but exile is somehow not over. So their sin hasn't been dealt with. That's the situation Jesus steps into. And it provides all sort of meaningful context for the way he interacts with Rome, the way he interacts with the religious leaders, and ultimately what's going on at the cross, because essentially God is saying, I'm bringing you out of exile for once and for all. I'm going to deal with your sin once and for all, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, that's what we're leading up to. We're transitioning into the New Testament. There's lots of bit readings in the New Testament, verse here, verse there. You can use, deal with those how you want to deal with them. But that also kind of highlights, I think, the way the different Gospels are written, because there's very little John that's going to show up in these first few days, because John is not nearly as interested in the birth narratives as is Luke, Matthew, and then to a lesser degree Mark. So yeah, just pay attention to things like little details like that. Like John really isn't around for the early life of Jesus. Jesus kind of steps on the scene very fully formed, fully at his ministry work and everything. So anyway, we're almost there, guys. It's September, man. We're on the downhill now. So keep it up. Keep up the readings if you can. Get back on the readings if you want. Whatever. It's cool. And let's finish this thing strong. Peace. Bye.